dispute the fact that codes were put into quilts. And this quilt actually is one of several that Midewin National Tallgrass Prairie has in their possession. They've loaned it to our institution so that we can travel with it and take it to talk about how codes were put inside of quilts to give signals to those that were freedom seekers, whether to stay or stop or go and that kind of thing. So I'm going to look at one. The footnotes that I brought were for another quilt. Ha ha ha, that's how that works, right? But for instance, this is the Jacob's ladder here. And so the Jacob ladder represents, what does it represent? Sylvia, you know in your head?
Oh, I can't remember. But that was part of an escape route, I think. When Jacob's ladder was part of, it of course, refers to a spiritual, but the spirituals were very often were also codes, about when to escape and where and how, and it didn't sound like it unless you knew the code.
Right.
But yeah, Jacob's ladder, I think, had to do with an escape route.
And then here, this would have been considered the North Star. And that was the guiding light that led slaves to Canada and to freedom.
That was the drinking gourd too, wasn't it?
Yeah, the drinking gourd. Yeah, the top star, the bottom star, and the.
And this one here is considered the drunkard's path. So it signaled to slaves that they should move in a staggering fashion, like maybe double back, because slave catchers were near. So this quilt and others were made especially by those who lived in the community, and they deposited them to the care of the Midewin National Tallgrass Prairie. In addition to this quilt, they also loaned us a 10-foot, no, it's longer than 10 feet, it's 11.
Wow.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah,
it's a huge mural. Yeah. And it's a panorama of how slaves sought freedom through Illinois. And it also has photographs of some places that are still throughout Illinois that are considered safe houses for blacks who sought freedom here. And so, imagine, looking for some kind of signal, whether it was a large quilt like this or a single pattern for giving you an indication as to what to do next as you went along seeking freedom. So again, this one here, the drunkard's path, would be providing a signal to runaway slaves that they should double back and not proceed forward because slave catchers were near. And so if you would like to see these patterns, these again, just as the biography of Elizabeth Keckley, you can Google it. And so the beauty of the internet is that you can read and see beautiful photographs of Elizabeth Keckley as well on the internet, and as well as looking at what the slave codes and quilts were. So they'll have, a description of what each of these patterns are. And they're quite different depending on the handiwork of people. Because when my mom does them, she does them, in a very different, distinct way. This quilt, you can see, is very finely done, the workmanship and the use of
yeah, those are actually quilting stitches.
Right. Whereas my mom, when she quilts, she quilts with her teeth. So she doesn't use scissors, and she does everything by hand according to however she wants to stitch that day. So she doesn't have deliberate.
Oh yeah, I know that.
So she just looks at stuff and tears it and puts it together. But yet it will have, the same pattern. So slaves had to be very mindful of looking for, these kind of codes.
I have a question. I came up late in your conversation, so I'm not sure. Where would they see these? How would they be out like somewhere where they could see them as they move to know the new message? I'm confused on how. I mean, if you were given one, that'd be one way, I suppose. But how would they get the message from one place to the next? As
there has
move
been
and
oral history that has been carried even from plantation to plantation. So it would not be unusual for people to see something that maybe not necessarily look this plain, but they would see maybe a marking on a tree, or they would see a fence changed to be opened in a way that they would know. So not necessarily a quilt would have been a pattern, but it may have been something along the way that they were seeking freedom that they would see had this shape or had this, And the same with communication now between African Americans. I can communicate with Sylvia from across the way without ever lifting my voice. I can give her a hand signal, I can give her a nod, I can do something that gives her indication. So this was not the only way of communication. So, you know, this wouldn't have not been the way that people deeply relied on how would they know to proceed if they were freedom seekers. There would be other things that they would be looking for
I
as
thought
well.
like they would hang them out to air or something
Yeah,
like
they
that.
would, but
At
this-
a
but this
location
is-
where they knew that the
Yeah.
runaway slaves could see
But
them.
quilt